that I've been meaning to talk to people about, well, like specific people, and it is Black Christianity. The conundrum that I've had for a long time, and also, like, I mean, I myself am Latinx, and so, like, why have we embraced the colonizers' religion?
This is something I think about a lot too. I read Malcolm X's By Any Means Necessary, and he okay, very radical in ways that people don't necessarily realize. Like, he was technically a segregationist. Like, he believed that Black and white people should be separate, but what he believed was that Black people should have the same exact resources that white people do. And so that kind of comes into play a little bit, but he was very adamant about Islam and Muslim, and Black people were, you know, traditionally Islam. And why did we drift away from it whenever we were brought to the Americas, dragged, whatever you want to call it, taken forcefully, obviously. But yeah, so for me, I'm half Black. Mom's white, dad's Black. And my dad was never religious. Like, I never saw that man pray. Never heard him talk about going to church. I don't even know if I've ever seen him in a church. But my sister, my older sister, she's my half sibling. We have the same dad. I would go to her with church a couple times. And the last time I ever like went to church and was like a part of it was for a Christmas thing that I did with her. I played the saxophone and she played the trumpet, and we played, I think, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. And like, it was beautiful. Like, we did a really good job, especially like, I didn't really play the saxophone like that. So I was really proud of myself, but we had like little old ladies like crying while we were playing. I was like, oh, that's so cute. But, yeah. Recently, a lot of the Julius Jones stuff was centered around Christianity. His family was very religious. Reverend C.C. Davis Jones, or Jones Davis, I always get the names backed up, but she's done a lot with that coalition, and like I said, she's a reverend. And so attending all those events, there was definitely a very holy aura around it. Like, and it felt necessary and practical, because we're fighting for this man's life. And like, it's literally up to the state if this man lives or dies, which is, it's like such a crude thought. Like, what? Like, that's literally insane. Like, you're going to murder somebody because they murdered somebody. Like, an eye for an eye. We learned that doesn't ever work out. So why are we still practicing it in our government? But I went to, I think it was Tabernacle Baptist Church on the east side. And it was after one of the Pardon and Parole Board hearings, and we were kind of just it was church. It was literally just church with a bunch of different activists there. And the way that they were just like talking about everything, very inclusive to the queer community as well. So whenever I saw that, I was like, wow, this is that new Christianity. Like, we're inclusive. Like, we're not turning anybody away for any reason. Like that, like, if there's going to be Christianity, like that's a good form of it. But in terms of Black people accepting Christianity as, you know, our main form of like religion, I think it's really because a lot of Black people in the United States still live in the South, and the South is heavy on Christianity. And even though it was sort of used against us for a long time, we sort of found a way to make it our own. Like, Black Christianity is so different from white Christianity, and not in like the super obvious way. My stomach is growling. Not in like the super obvious way of, you know, just like, we believe this, we believe that. Just the emotion behind it and the way that they interact with one another. white churches just feel so like, you got to do the right thing. You got to do the right thing right now. Like no room for mistakes. Like can't say the wrong thing. But Black churches, there's a little bit more grace. Like obviously there's still some things that you shouldn't say at church, but they're more open to having difficult dialogue about the role Christianity plays in the suppression of certain groups. So yeah, it's been interesting sort of looking at that aspect of it. But yeah, religion is wild.
Yeah, well, because I've been doing lately for maybe even like the past year or something, I've been sort of analyzing what like I am and where like my roots are, but also like what the connotations are of just like colonization or just decolonization. And so for the longest time, I've just been like, I'm not really like Hispanic, like not culturally anyways, that I don't behave or like have any of the like cultural touchstones that like anyone would expect of someone that is embedded in that culture. And I actually had a guest on the podcast sort of be like, hey, that's actually like harmful to yourself to like say that. And like, it took me a while to like understand like what that meant. And so I really had to break it down to myself. And while I still don't necessarily like embrace like the cultural touchstones that would make me Hispanic, I also acknowledge that I am, regardless of whatever it is that I do or take part in. And so I think that was one of the bigger things, is that like, no, my music is Venezuelan American, regardless of if it sounds like it. But then thinking of like colonization further, of like I have a lot of like Native American North and South, like on my dad's side, like his grandmother was straight up like indigenous, like they lived in the forest, like or in the jungle actually, because I was born in Venezuela. And so like I have that sort of direct route to indigenous, but it's like, why are we Catholic?
Yeah. Catholicism is 100% just a product of colonization. Mm-hmm. Like they really force it upon everybody in South America. This is a little like, it's still on the same topic, but a little just like quick question. So do you prefer Hispanic or Latinx? What do you think is the difference?
I personally don't care.
Love that.
It's actually the same with pronouns. I don't care about my own pronouns. But since other people lately seem to prefer Latinx, so I say that. Sometimes Hispanic comes out because I don't have to say a weird sounding word. One weird thing that like of being bilingual is that I've always been self-conscious about changing accent in the middle of a sentence. Yeah. And so I tell people my name is Santiago Ramones. That's like the anglicized version of saying my name. Exactly. My name is Santiago Andres Ramones Machado. But it's really weird to just like flip that. Yeah. And it's like surprising, and like then people have questions. So
yeah, well, it's code switching, which like a lot of people, we think about that mostly with Black people in white spaces, or sometimes white people in Black spaces, which it's like, if you're a white person hanging out with Black people, you don't need to use AAVE in order to seem cool. Like if you're a good person and you're down for the cause, then you don't need to front about who you are, where you come from. But in terms for Black people, and definitely people like you, bilingual, and somebody like me who's mixed, And we're used to being a part of two very drastically different cultures, and sort of going from one to the other can feel hard for sometimes. Like you want to fit into the group that you're with. So you kind of do what's necessary with it. Certain situations I'm all like formal and I've got to say big words and fancy things. And then whenever things are a little bit more relaxed, I go back to normal Anna, and I'm chill again. But yeah, code switching it's so real, and it's sort of like a survival tactic.
Yeah,
which is it's unfortunate for sure, but yeah, people just need to be aware of code switching for people who are either bilingual, biracial, multiracial, or just straight up, another race from whoever they're around is vastly different from a white person who's code switching in order to seem cool to whichever group they're with.
Yeah. I've never really my perspective of my own life using code switching has sort of just been like, I guess you could listen to my immigration episode thing, because that was episode 275, which recently had an update, so listen to that one. But it is sort of like a survival thing, but also of because I grew up undocumented, I sort of had to tone down the fact that I am not from here so that I don't gather unwanted attention.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole other scary thing. It's literally a form of survival for lots of people, which is, that's so sad that you had to do that. It's unbelievably heartbreaking, but it's the harsh reality that a lot of people face.
But with that, I don't know, I also have little attachment to cultural norms at all, in a weird way, because I'm also not Catholic. I'm not religious at all. And so the disavowal of religion, and then the disavowal of because of, in a way, code switching, trying to fit in, I let go of everything a long time ago. And so it's kind of nice to be able to go well, I like this thing and I don't like that thing, so I just don't have to take the things that I don't like out of the everything. And so obviously the values of Catholicism are probably still inside me, but I've learned to tone down or suppress the homophobia that has been so embedded in that culture. And that's actually something that even going back to the colonizer religion sort of thing, is that our indigenous cultures were way more, or are way more, open to anything else, but that has been lost to time and colonization. And so the exploration for me of finding out what I am, but also not necessarily even holding on to it, because it's all right, well, I have a lot of Spanish and European in my background as well, and it's I know what those are because that has been embedded in this culture as well. But what can I take out of all of the things that I like and don't like? And so I don't know, I feel the survival mechanism to an extent makes sense of hey, if you don't become Catholic, we will kill you. And so it's all right, cool. Yeah. Jesus, my homie.
Yeah, I've heard of him. We go way back.
And then, just over time, it's we're all Catholic because our parents were Catholic, and then it just kind of keeps going. But my wife and I just recently watched everyone should watch this show, Maya and the Three. It's an animated Netflix show. The creator is Mexican, and like he put a lot of like Inca, Maya, Aztec like stuff into it to where it's not just like Mexican culture, but it's like indigenous culture, cool, yeah. Like South American indigenous culture, and that is really cool to embrace, because it's like these are the parts of ourselves that have been lost to colonization.
Oh yeah, 100%. Whenever I turned 18, so I always knew like half of my lineage, because like white people my mom could tell me like everybody going back so far. And my dad never even, like, I don't know my great grandfather's name. Like, I don't know these things. So I did like the DNA thing, because last name's Littlejohn. So everyone's like, are you indigenous? And I was like, I don't know. So I looked it up. No, not at all. Littlejohn, even though it sounds indigenous, is, it's very European. It literally just comes from like Little John. Like if there were two Johns and one was smaller than the other, he was the Little John. Yeah. So that's where the last name comes from. But whenever I did that, like found out a lot of my, African lineage comes from Nigeria and Cameroon. And then I'm also Jewish, like just a little bit of Jewish. I was like, wow, didn't know that. That's where the nose comes from. But yeah, it was super cool, because I'd always thought that, I could maybe be indigenous, but there was no way to know. And then DNA testing became like big and popular, and everyone was sending off their spit to get tested. So I was like, yeah, I might as well. And it was really cool to find out, different places that I have ancestry from. But also the thing with Ancestry DNA is it straight up showed me the slave route that my ancestors took from like Virginia down through Louisiana, then Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. I was like, yep, they probably walked that too. And that, like, while it's I don't even want to say it's cool to know, because it's not cool. It's not fucking cool that happened, but it's definitely the most emotional part of like finding out my ancestry. It's like we were just chilling in Africa, just having a great time. And then somebody came over and either like just straight up kidnapped them or persuaded them and promised them something that wasn't the truth in order to get them to come over here. And then just everything that happened to them along the way throughout the years that got us up until the present. Yeah, it's very emotional, and like it makes you mad, but like it's weird, because like it makes you so mad that it happened, but it makes you like happy to know at least like where you came from, how you got here, how your people got here. Yeah, it was truly wild to see that. Still think about it all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, we have a history and not all of it is going to be pretty. And so in a weird way, like it doesn't have to be like traumatic, because it's like we are here now. And I mean, yes, we still feel the generational effects of like being kept out as a community for generations, but like, it's good to know that like this is where we came from. And but again, like utilizing the aspects of it that we do like and utilizing aspects of it that we don't like, because there is still a lot of like internalized like homophobia and internalized like racism that is embedded in these cultures. And so as the future generation ourselves, we get to decide what traumas we want to perpetuate or not. Yeah. Hopefully none, but
I think the main, I don't even want to say the main thing. So this is like about, I guess the queer community and the Black community and Black queer people. So as a Black non-binary person, in Oklahoma, like there's not a lot of us. We are here. Don't get it twisted. We're here, but there's not very many of us. And so when having these conversations about like with Black elders about like my pronouns, they, them, I only do they, them. If you do she, her, I'm like, who dat? Who you talking about? Not me. So sort of like explaining this to Black elders, some of them are like, no, I don't understand. I don't ever want to understand. Like, no. And then some of them are like, okay, I could see this. And then they start to, connect pieces and other people in their life who, could potentially be non-binary, but haven't necessarily done discovering about themselves enough, or, really about what being non-binary actually is and how it's really not, anything. It's not this major commitment that you're making. Like, gender is a binary and you can choose to be a part of it or not. And so, sort of teaching the Black elders about, the queer Black youth and how they need to feel and how you need to accept them, is it's really hard, but it's incredibly rewarding. I started this piece. I never posted it. I just realized that I never published it, but it's called The Radical Act of Being Black and Non-Binary. And in it, I sort of just, it's kind of like an open letter that I wrote to parents of queer Black youth, and how, yeah, they might want to go by a different pronoun. They might want to change their name, and then they might even change their mind. They might go back. They might change it to something else again. But it's not your job to judge them for that. It's not your job to tell them that they're not allowed to do that. It's your job to accept them as they are. And if they change something, then you have to accept that too, because people can always change who they are, but they can never change who their parents are. Mm-hmm. And if you as a parent aren't there for your kids like that, then they're not going to feel like anybody is there for them. So yeah, that's an open letter that I wrote that I'm going to get out probably someday. I might even wait till Pride because I can do that. But yeah, I assume it's fairly similar in the Latinx community. I don't know a lot about that. But I assume there are definitely strong comparisons.
Yeah. And that, again, sort of this conversation being rooted in like how Christianity has sort of colonized our culture, in that, like, yeah, that unwillingness to accept just a different perspective is just like these very strict rules that have been imposed on us, rather than we willingly accept them. Yeah. I also kind of went down this train of thought whenever I like discovered Afrofuturism. Mm-hmm. And so like one of my favorite, do I say band groups, whatever, is Clipping.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So good. Sorry. Okay.
And so like, yeah, Splendor and Misery is like, just, hey, this is an example of Afrofuturism. Like, what's Afrofuturism? And it's like, hey, look, Black Panther, and like, I mean, going all the way back to like Sun Ra and stuff, but like Afrofuturism is a beautiful expression of not just like decolonization, but even like a what if, as though there was no colonization. Yeah. And it's beautiful to see that, and I love that and embrace it. And it like made me be like, what is indigenous futurism? Yeah. Like what would that look like? And so I don't know if there's been enough opportunity for like that to like be made. And I know that like people are probably like finding ways of doing that, but like, the Afrofuturism itself is like a niche thing anyways.
Yeah, and I like that you use that term for it, because a lot of the times Black people have, like, one of the things that we deal with is like, no matter what music we make, white people for some reason love to like throw R&B on there. It's like, this is not R&B. Like Zoe Kravitz, her project Lola Wolf, it like on iTunes for the longest, it was like R&B. I'm like, this is, no, like, what? Like, that's not what this is at all. And then SZA is now, but whenever she started, her music was very different. Her first like album, I can't remember what it's called, but not Control, but the one before that is very different from Control. Like Control, she got really into the R&B. She kind of settled into it. But before that, that's not really the music that she was doing, and people still called it that. And that's that's just, it's a weird thing that always happens to Black people, is like, before we can even say what we are, somebody has already put us into a box. And so, yeah, I love the Afrofuturism label for it, because like that's so broad, and it's way more specific than just the R&B. It's like, I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, well, like the other weird thing is like Afrofuturism is more of like a content genre rather than like a sonic genre. Right. And so like, yeah, the movie Black Panther is Afrofuturism. Right. And so like for people to think about like, oh yeah, the what if question of what if these cultures had been allowed to thrive?
Right. Right. Oh my God.
And so it's a really cool thing to explore and then to celebrate outside of colonization.
Right. And even with like Black Panther as an example, in the story is like, the reason they were able to thrive is because they kept themselves a secret. Like the world didn't know about what was going on there. They didn't know that they had all these like technological advancements because they kept it to themselves. Because I didn't read the comics, but I assume that they knew that if they did that, then they would be overexploited. Their resources would be drained, and then they'd be left with nothing. Essentially, how Africa is now, which is great. I'm so sad about Chadwick, and I know that they're talking about replacing him. They're trying to decide if they want to like get a different person, or if I don't know what they want, but we definitely deserve more than just the one movie. Oh my gosh. Like it was truly groundbreaking to go see that in theaters. And it's like, you know, little Black boys there in the movies, and they get to like see a superhero who looks like them. And like, it's not even just the protagonist, it's also the antagonist. And not saying that, you know, little boys want to grow up to be like rotten little kids, but they get both aspects of it. Like, it's not just one. Like typically whenever Black people are in superhero movies, it's just the one. And so, yeah, it was so beautiful to see. And like, I cried in the theater just because like I knew how much that this meant to the culture. So, yeah. I love it. So good.
A celebration outside of colonization.
And the album is amazing too. It's like Kendrick didn't need to go that hard, but we thank him for it. Even though only 2 songs were actually in the movie, it's okay. It's okay.
But I mean, and again, I'm sort of looking for what that looks like for indigenous. And it's interesting, like this aspect of it is because like, it's not something that people really talk about, but like Latinx is indigenous.
Yeah.
And for some reason we have a distinction because Spain. I guess
Spain, right? And then Portugal did a little bit, but not as good of a job as Spain.
And so like, you know, there's Native Americans here in the US who like, yeah, probably do have some like, yeah, indigenous and white mixture in there, but like they're still considered Native American. But like Latinx is the same thing. Yeah. But we're like a separate ethnicity for some reason.
And then also the Afro Latinx, where it's people who are descendants of both indigenous and enslaved peoples. And that's, yeah, they definitely don't get a lot of attention. And there's so many things like this that white people don't realize. Like they see brown people and they just immediately, like sometimes without even realizing it, they just throw them in a box already. And so, you know, boxes don't need to exist. And if they do exist, they're not meant to be closed like that, at least in this scenario. So.
And then just like the concept of indigenous actually just applies to everywhere. Yeah. So something that I was talking to my wife about is that like there are cultures that didn't experience colonization. Right. And so we can look at Asian culture and like the Chinese Empire goes all the way back.
Yeah, all the way. But they're like the colonizers of Asia, so
Sure.
we see you, China. We know what you did.
Well, I mean,
This is Singapore.
Genghis Khan did a number on that as well. So, but like we're able to like look at that culture all the way back. We're able to look at European culture all the way back. Like Anglo-Saxons are indigenous to Europe.
Right.
So like they are indigenous people, but like not in the way that we want to put in a box nowadays.
Exactly. We're still just like colonizers.
Sure. And then like people that live in Africa are indigenous to Africa. Yeah. And like the people who remained there are all the way indigenous.
Yeah. Indigenous it's like a hot term over here in the Americas. Like, and it's definitely new that we've started actually calling them indigenous, like at least for, the US, like for the longest they were the Indians, and it's like, but this ain't India. And so they're like, okay, Native Americans. And it's like, okay, but we're not honoring that they were the Native Americans. And so it's indigenous has kind of, become the main acceptable term. But yeah, it's really gone all over the place here, which is sad. And especially in Oklahoma, we have so many different tribes, so many different cultures, and they've all kind of had to do the work themselves to reestablish. Like a lot of things got lost. And so they had to do a lot of digging, a lot of exploring, and, work to get it back to where it is. I have a couple of friends who have done work with the Potawatomi Tribe. And in terms of tribes, it's a relatively, white one. There's a lot of assimilation that happened within that tribe. But I have a friend who works in Shawnee with the tribe, and they've written children's books in like the language, and they've done amazing work to learn the language and to teach it to the youth, which I think is absolutely beautiful. But it's also sad that it got lost for so long, and that people didn't know about it, and they didn't have the connection to their culture for, whatever reason. They didn't even know that they belonged to that culture. So it's beautiful that we're starting to recognize Indigenous people a little bit better. With FAM opening up, what is it? The First Americans Museum, which was under construction for like decades, like a ridiculously long time. There was a lot of issues going on with like funding and all of that jazz, but it's open now. I haven't been able to go yet, but I've heard it's absolutely beautiful. So everyone needs to go at some point. Yeah.
I think all of this sort of traces back to like just history at all. And so to dig into one's own culture or one's own heritage means that you are looking back at history. And so it's like, for Black people, you do have to like see the slave trade happen in your history. But like the cool thing about it is that like there's so much in there that like was achieved that hopefully we can resurface again and like see that like, hey, the Mayas or Aztecs building fucking pyramids that like align with the stars is insane.
Right. They loved it though. And they were so good at it. Like unbelievable. I think the craziest thing about African heritage in the US, it's like Kwanzaa, it's Christmas time. And so Kwanzaa is just, it's funny because it's literally like an American made holiday by American Black people, because we felt like we needed something. Like we wanted to learn how to like celebrate our culture in the same way that, white Christianity has kind of been celebrated through Christmas, like all the white Santas.
Also, well, because I mean, if you go to that too, it's like, well, Christmas itself is just a whitewashing, not even whitewashing, a Christian washing of what was a pagan celebration.
Exactly.
And so you can look at the placement in the year of where these holidays happen and like see why that is and why the like imagery is what it is.
Right.
And so like Christmas is all snowy and stuff. Why is that? Because like Jesus was born like in the desert. And so like, what does that have to do with anything? And it's like, well, it's because it's a pagan celebration that had to do with like snuggling together for warmth because yay, we're surviving the winter.
And
like,
even the whole like Easter, like he was dead for 3 days and then he came back, and that's just really like a reflection of the sun, because for 3 days, the last 3 days of the year, the sun stays in the exact same spot and then it starts to move back in the direction that it had came. And so it's like literally Easter and the story of like Jesus's resurrection is literally just like a mirror image of like what actually happens in our solar system or on our planet at the end of every year. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Christianity takes over.
Yeah, but but that's the thing. It's like it's also just like the next thing. Like empires rise and fall, and so like that's just the one that has lasted during our time, right, which has been a long time. And it is just kind of like random. Like it could have been anything else. It could have been Islam.
Yeah, and I just love that it's like it's 2021 AD after death of Jesus Christ. It's like even our years are based on literally Christianity, which is absolutely wild. And they don't really, I don't want to say they don't deserve it, but they don't deserve it.
It's all random and arbitrary. And so like the kind of going back to my earlier point that like there are things in every culture that we can just take what we want and take what we don't, or like leave what we don't want. And so like it's cool to like, these are the things even in indigenous cultures that I like, but like I don't have to necessarily keep the like blood sacrifices that come from like cool, like thanks for building the pyramids, those are super cool and that science is like top notch, but also maybe don't want the blood sacrifices. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that though. Yeah. At least for me, like growing up half and half, it's like literally just whenever you're as much in both cultures equally, you kind of don't really you don't really notice how different things are, because it's just, you just know that there's like kind of two different ways to do things and neither is right or wrong. It's just, you're just exposed to both. And so both are just an option. But when you live in a community that is predominantly one over the other, one obviously takes, precedent. But it was really kind of wild to like think that I was a white person for a long time, because it's true. I really did. I didn't know. I didn't know I was Black. It's truly insane. But when I did, I was like, oh, okay, now things are making sense. Like my family, like we do things differently. Like whenever the whole families get together, like it's a way different situation. Like whenever we would have like, big parties on the Black side of my family and then parties on the white side of my family. It's like parties with the white side of my family, we're all there on time. But whenever it's the Black side of my family, it's like my sister's going to be there like 2 hours late. Like my dad's going to, be doing something for like 30 minutes before he actually comes down and like greets everybody. And it's just like different, kind of like cultural cues, I guess, that come into play. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I do enjoy the mixed experience. I know that sounds weird, but it's like I feel like I'm able to combat issues better because even though I am Black, I kind of understand why white people think the way they do if they're like super racist about something. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that like I can mentally map out how they got to that conclusion. I'm going to call them out on it and I might cuss their ass out for it. But I feel like it helps me kind of like open the dialogue a little bit, because it's like I'm a Black person who grew up in a white community. And if you're saying something like this because about Black people, like Black people do this, Black people do that. It's like, well, I mean, I didn't because I didn't grow up in that community. I grew up in your community. So, oh yeah. America, it truly is a melting pot, which is like a terrible term for it. I never really liked that term, but yeah, it's wild, but beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a cool thing to be able to just embrace all of it. And that's the hard part, is like being able to embrace all of it and not being like persecuted for doing so. And I don't know, it's difficult in some ways to like have to explain like your trauma to someone, or just like generational trauma, or even just like what systemic racism is and like what this whole thing means. And then is it even my job to even explain this to you? So a topic that like came to mind earlier is just like white activism on behalf of, and like I appreciate the help, but also just I don't know, like shut up.
Yeah, I practice a lot of caution when I'm interacting with white people who assert themselves in Black spaces. I'm not saying that they all have like ulterior motives or whatever, but I'm just saying like, well, why is this affecting you so heavy? Like, I'm glad that you are down for the cause, but why? Why? Because like we as Black people, we know why we're there. As brown people, we know why we're there. It's like, this is our lives. We're fighting for ourselves. But white people who kind of like sort of propel themselves to the forefront of these issues, some of them think that they're doing the right thing. They're like, I'm using my privilege. I'm like using my white voice in order to help those Black and brown. It's like, okay, but did you think that maybe the voice that you're using could have been, you know, given to somebody else who has the exact same like thoughts as you do, but is just a person of color? That as well. And yeah, I'm not saying that every white person is out there to like, you know, get notoriety and attention and all that stuff, but just yeah, I want them to be aware of, yeah, you are using your privilege, but you're using your privilege. Like come on, use your privilege to give somebody else a privilege. So yeah, just if you've got something to say and you know a Black person has the same thought, let them say it first.
Yeah. Which I guess a thing that we mentioned before recording, but like, you know, there's a lot of white dude musicians, which is not a bad thing in itself. But like the rest of us are out here, and it would be nice to like be recognized as such, that like we are all here. And that's a little bit of what I'm trying to do with the podcast.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job, honestly. When I was in the street carts, I was the only femme and I was the only person of color. And it was like, I loved the street carts. Like, I loved the music we make. I loved playing the shows. But as being somebody who was very obviously like visually different than everybody else that was in the group, I was always just like, the eyes are on me. They're looking at me like they're expecting something from me, or they're going to try to put me in a box. It's like, I'm always trying to prepare for that. And then with Burl, Jordan, the front man, he's also Latinx. So it's like, we got 2 brown people in this group, and there's also technically 6 people total. So it's like, we're already a lot bigger. There's a lot more places to look, but I don't feel as much of an oddity as I did in the street carts. And I'm not saying that like, you know, I didn't, you know, like the street carts. I didn't like that experience of being in a band with just, you know, 3 white dudes. But it definitely helps to not be the only like minority in a group. Like, you feel like your voice is more heard, I guess, because they're a little bit more aware of those things in ways that, a group that's just white dudes probably isn't. Something that I dealt with a lot, even at ACM, is I would say something and then it like nobody would like respond to it. And then like mere seconds later, a white dude would say the exact same thing verbatim that I said. And then somebody would be like, that's a great idea. And it's like, that was my idea. And this happens all the time.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves.
I hate it. It's so bad. So, and like, look, a little bit my fault. Like I could be a little bit more brave and like say things out loud, but also as like a femme person in a male dominated industry, you don't necessarily, have that much, like you got to have major confidence to be able to do that. And like, while I did meet some amazingly like nice people, like we met at ACM and you were amazing. You're so nice. But then there were some people that were not, just like about like a recording technique, like a way that I did something that this white dude didn't agree with. He was like, why would you even do that? That's so dumb. Like, why would you even like waste your time doing that? It's like, why would you even waste your time trying to tell somebody that something that they're doing creatively is wrong or dumb? It's like in certain contexts, you could be like, well, there's an easier way to get that outcome that you're doing without having to do as much work. Like there's so many ways to say things in a way that is encouraging and informative and helpful other than just like, why are you doing that? Why are you making that decision? Like, that's so dumb. Like that. Oh, that was like hurtful and like hard to deal with. And like that guy was not a friend. Like I'm not going to call him a friend. And then even having like race conversations with different white dudes from ACM. I remember I had a conversation with a few because they wanted to say the N-word like in rap songs. I was like, no. And they're like, well, why? They already said it. Like I can say it. And I'm like, no. And I even had this one friend who was like, I have as much privilege as a black man because my hair is long. And I was like, you can cut your hair though. Black men can't change to the color of their skin. Yeah. It's not the same thing at all. And yeah, it was truly wild to like experience and have those conversations. But ultimately, I feel like they did stop saying the N-word in rap songs, at least whenever I was around. But yeah, it was a crazy experience there.
I'm formulating this thought, is that we as people of color have a very different experience with rules.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Like we have to follow the rules to a T or we're punished, essentially.
Or we're like not good enough or whatever that is. And so we're never able to enforce the rules or challenge the rules. And we're never going to be in a position of power that like allows us to even change those rules. So like we just have to follow them. Right. Versus like white people have a tendency to be able to challenge rules and change rules. And so one of the best things that I learned out of ACM and then even further into my master's is that like rules aren't real.
Oh no, not at all. Especially not with music. Like all rules are fake. And my boyfriend, he's a white dude. It's something that I've been trying to be a little bit better at because like I try not to get in trouble. Like I try my hardest not to get in trouble. So I play by the rules in a not every single rule. I do break rules. Don't get it twisted. But I play by the rules in a way that will keep me out of trouble, essentially. Like I'm very safe when it comes to like driving places. Oklahoma City is one of the deadliest places for Black people in terms of interactions with the police. And so there's sometimes where he'll be driving and he'll do something that I won't do in the car because I'm like, they'll see me, they'll get me. And I'll be like, hey, don't do that. And I'll be like, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm like, okay, but you need to realize that your experience with the police is vastly different from mine. My brother and I, in February of this year, a white lady called the police on us because I got out of the car and she was parked on the line and my door tapped her door. And she called the police on us. Like, and that's the second time that the police have been called on like me and somebody in my family. And the other time was whenever my nephew at his own house crawled under his garage because he accidentally locked the front door behind him and he left the garage door cracked because he did that from time to time. He was a middle schooler. So he crawled under and this lady down the street thought it was a dude breaking in and called the police. And I'm like, this is a 12-year-old. Yeah. Like that, it's just like, those situations are terrifying. Like, luckily, earlier this year, I had spent a lot of time interacting with the police over last year. So I knew what was going to happen and I knew how to interact with them. So they showed up and my brother was like, the police are coming. Like, we can't leave. We have to stay. He was like freaking out. And I was like, you don't need to talk. I'm the one who tapped her door. You don't have to say anything. So you're just going to sit there. You're going to keep your hands on the steering wheel and we're just going to tell them what they need to know. And so we were in my hometown. We went there because I had to get a new car. Mine had gotten totaled. So my brother drove me up there and I called her mom and she worked in the school district. So she knows some of the cops. And so she pulled up and they're like, do I know you? She's like, yeah, probably. I'm counselor at the 9th grade center. They're like, oh, Miss Mar. And so like our white mother literally like was a cushion there. Like, and the lady, whenever she called the police, she straight up told them on the phone that me and my brother were Black and that she was a white lady, which is something the police do not need to know. Absolutely do not need to know. And then they got there and they're like, yeah, you didn't do anything wrong or illegal. She was just freaking out and she was crazy. So she's going to leave first, wait a few minutes, and then you guys can leave too. And it was, yeah, luckily the cops that came were super understanding, super under chill. They were apparently well-versed in their Karen stories and they knew what to expect. But it was truly wild. It's like if we didn't get cops that, you know, were understanding or cops that were in a bad mood, like who knows what could have happened.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a wager that we can't make.
Right. So yeah, whenever I'm like in a car with a white person who's driving and we're especially in this city, like, and they do something that, you know, I wouldn't do. I'm like, hey, for my peace of mind, can we please try to not do that tonight? Especially if it's like a weekend, it's super late at night. The cops are already looking for somebody. I try to practice as much caution as possible. So, yeah. But I also, I kind of let it get the best of me sometimes because I'm so scared of like getting arrested. Like the county jail here is not the place to be. There's roaches, there's mold, there's bed bugs. Somebody dies there literally every single month. It's truly, truly disgusting. It's like as close to hell as you can get without leaving the state. So I I try to, you know, like maybe like put that anxiety, like push it down a little bit and like realize that like not every situation where you would get pulled over would warrant you getting arrested. So there are times to be concerned, cautious, and then there are times to not be as concerned or cautious. And yeah, just like learning that and pushing like my fear of the police as a Black person a little bit down because having white people around does help. I hate to say it, but like my boyfriend's been pulled over so many times. He got pulled over the other week going like 85 and a 60. And I was just like, he got a ticket and they like bumped it down for him too and everything. But there's so many situations like that like it's hard to see how that would go differently or how it could go the same if it were, you know, my brother or my sister. Like my oldest brother literally went to jail for a year because he couldn't pay child support. Like, would that happen to a white dude that easily for a year and a half? Like, who's to really know? Who's to say? But we're just always hyper aware of these things.
Yeah. I grew up undocumented. And so going to college, like commuting, because I went to UCO and later to ACM. I just drive the speed limit. Like there is no
the
other
exact
option.
Speed limit, cruise control, and everything.
Yeah. Because like it's one thing to like, oh, get pulled over and like pay a ticket. It's like, oh, I don't have the money to pay a ticket. And like that's a class struggle that anyone can share in. But like also like, hey, if I get pulled over, like who's to say they like run my not ID and like at the time. And so like interaction with police equals I could get deported.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That's terrifying. Yeah. Nobody needs to live in fear like that. Like, I hate that the like slogan for the police is like to protect and serve. It's like, where's the protection? Like the protection only comes after a crime has been committed. And then it's not truly protection at that point because it didn't prevent anything from happening. But yeah, like getting pulled over as an undocumented person, like they might not do anything. They might not like run it and see. But if you were to like go to jail for something, like 100% they would run it. Like our county jail has 2 ICE officers, I believe, that are just like literally contract. Like this is something we don't have to have in our county jail. We literally do not have to have it. But the county wrote a contract with ICE to allow them to do that. And so it's like, yeah, they could get arrested for something and then just like immediately deported. And it's just absolutely unfair. And
yeah, I now have a green card. We're cool.
Yes, let's
but
get
like,
it.
that's a trauma that doesn't go away. And so that is something else that like in explaining these things to people whose privilege may not allow them to see immediately is like, police interaction doesn't mean the same thing for you. And last thought, how do you feel about the like race class distinction? I was talking to my brother about this morning, that like some problems are like really just class distinctions and we sort of divide ourselves by looking at it racially. And then there's other things that I was making the point of like the race distinction will still be there. Right. And I actually quoted Wesley's theory by Kendrick Lamar, because that's like that Wesley Snipes thing is the exact example of like, doesn't matter how rich you are, you're still black. Right.
Exactly. So for the, let's just talk about like the everyday community. So here in the city, this area is,
I live in just not Nichols Hills.
Yeah,
this is
just barely not.
Distinctly not Nichols Hills.
Yeah, but Nichols Hills is it's a majority white neighborhood. East side, majority black. West side got a lot of Latinx community as well as the south side. But the west side also has a lot of poor white people. So basically on all the outskirts of Oklahoma City, you have these marginalized communities. And they're okay. So segregation used to be, purely race. And then as, that became not accepted anymore, they made it more subtle and they sort of broadened it. So now just all impoverished people are kind of lumped into the same category. So if you're black and poor, you're going to have a hard time. If you're already poor, if you're just poor and white, you're going to have a hard time. But the thing is like people are more likely at least like big companies are more likely to trust and go with a poor white person than a poor black person. Just because like it's that simple. So while there are obvious differences in the way that Black and brown communities are treated as opposed to white communities, they've now sort of deemed poor white people as undesirables and just lumped them together. So even if there's not a large Black population, it's mostly a poor population, they're still going to pick that community over Nichols Hills to put the landfill, to put a recycling plant, to put, you know, any type of coal powered fire plant. So yeah, it's
good old NIMBY.
It's what's the word? Unfortunate, but being aware of it helps us change the policies that allows those things to happen. So yeah, just keep having those open dialogue conversations about this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And the more we talk about it and the more that we, you know, ignite a public outrage, then the more likely we are to see change and lasting change at that.
Yeah, I think that in some ways in specific situations, we might like be looking at race too much. And in some situations, we might be looking at class too much. And one is just like applying enough critical thinking to be able to like decipher whether or not this is a race thing or a class thing or is
no critical thinking. It's illegal in this state.
Yeah. Nuance is dead. So we just don't do that anymore. And so, yeah, I think that like, if, a poor white person is talking about like, yeah, but my life is hard too. It's like, yes, it is. I'm not denying that.
Right. But it's your class, which can always change, but your race cannot. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the like, all poor people are just temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
Yeah,
so.
Temporarily embarrassed. I like that.
And so, I mean, that's another great way that like corporations will get all of the poor people's money. I can't remember if I've said this on the podcast before, but like regarding art or like media is highbrow art is made by poor people for rich people to consume. And then lowbrow art is made by rich people for poor people to consume.
Precisely.
And it's just like a nice way of like looking at it to be like, what kind of stuff are we making? Who is our market? And
yeah, that reminds me, I was at this event a few months ago, and it was a conversation with a white woman who she does podcasts, and she's like, know your worth. Whatever you think you should charge, add 30%. And I was like, whoa. I was like, first of all, as a Black person, you can't just do that, because then they'll be like, no, I can go somewhere else and get it cheaper. Yeah. So it's like, while you do need to know your worth, and you definitely should, you shouldn't settle, but the reality is that you have to. So knowing your worth doesn't always have to do with how much money you ask. It has to do with the boundaries that you set of what you're willing to do and what you're willing to not do for the price that you gave. So yeah, I was like, that's so bold of you to say that, like add 30%. I was like, you think we could just do that and people would be okay? It's like, no, we're a media production company. We're giving people news. They already are not in the mindset of giving us money. So to ask for more money than we normally would definitely probably not blow over well. But yeah, we live off donations though. So
yeah. Well, with that, thank you so much for doing this with me. Where can we find you and your things?
Let's see. Okay, what did I say last time? On Instagram, my personal account is Flora Curl, which is FLORICURL. And then my business accounts on Twitter and Instagram are at TBT Anna.
Yeah. And you can support the Black Times and give them your money. And if you don't have money, then give them your shares. And I mean, honestly, like your guys' coverage over the Julius Jones thing, like I'm glad it blew up and caught national attention.
Yeah, it was wild.
Because I mean, it's more things need to be said about these things, and these are things that are happening here, and we can all be more informed on these things, and it's great.
Yeah. If you guys want to know what's going on here, the Black Times OK on Twitter and Instagram. I think we have Facebook too, but I don't get on Facebook. So
Facebook is dead.
Facebook's dead. Unless you're over 40.
Yeah, I guess. Once again, thank you so much. I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Anna Littlejohn.
And now here's Wakari Mashtaka by the Streetcar Nations.
I met you in Sapporo, where the snow falls all around. I tried to get to know you, but I couldn't make a sound.
Pick it up.
Couldn't speak the language and you couldn't speak mine. In spite of it all, it turned out fine. Woo, I met you in a moment. I was feeling so alone. I thought that there was nothing for me away from home. When I finally saw you, I could hardly complain. And I knew one thing from that day: I'll come back to you someday. I'll come back to you someday. Wakare mashtaka, wakare mashtaka. Anata ga daisuki desu. Wakare mashtaka, wakare mashtaka. Anata ga daisuki desu. You took me on a road trip to see the shining sea. You told me there was something that you had inside of me.
Yeah.
And when we finally got to where the water meets rocks, I started questioning my thoughts. Woo, we went to my apartment and we gave into our minds. But something deep inside me said, is there or something that this time? And when I finally told you I am going back, you sat and cried, please love me back. I'll come back to you someday. I'll come back to you someday.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music and produce audio. The music you're hearing now is music I made. You can listen to official releases by Santiago Ramones on Spotify, Apple Music, and the other streaming places. Or you can buy it on Bandcamp because a single purchase is the monetary equivalent of streaming it all day, every day, for about a week. I'm working on an album, so if you'd like to hear that at some point, you can buy my music, or you can support me on Patreon. There's a Discord server in which we discuss deep topics from the podcast, but it's also a community of beautiful human beings. All the links to all my things are on my website, santiagoramones.com. If you like the podcast, leave comments on social media, leave reviews saying how much you like the podcast, and tell your friends about it. I want to help the world have deeper conversations. So thank you for listening to and supporting Bit Depth. Where is it? Yeah. I was on the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.